when I think about where I want to go, and I do a lot of the reflection and discovery around it, I think about who are the people who have been there and done that, and then I go seek them out. I think mentors show up in people's lives, like the teacher shows up when the student's ready.
100%.
And I've sought out the right teachers when I've been ready and I've needed them, and the right people have just showed up, and I've been very fortunate. But I've also haven't been scared to tell people I need help.
Yeah, that's important too. I've seen like finding mentors as a way to kind of explore different paths and lifestyles as well. Like I started out with Tom Bilyeu, who is like very A-type, hyper performer. Just like work, work, work all the time, and but also super successful. Built $1 billion company, right? And it's like at the time, that's the similar to you. It's like at that super ambition, I was like, that's what I want. And so I gravitated towards him. And through learning from him, through being around him, through working from him, observing everything he did, slowly I realized that that's not actually what I wanted. You know, that is the biggest lesson for me. That was an invaluable lesson that he taught me of like, oh, this is not actually the lifestyle that I want. And so then hopped onto another mentor, which is like, oh, like because I'm still very drawn to entrepreneurship, but like let me try to find an entrepreneurship that has figured out, not that the other path isn't great. I think everyone has a different path, but like let's figure out a way to balance like a very healthy group of friends, social life, like hobbies, but also like running a super successful business at the same time. Maybe not at the scale of the $1 billion company, but like still a very successful company, right? And so that's why I hopped on to another mentor, which is like who I'm working with right now, Noah Kagan. But I just think that there's something about, you have a vision of like, oh, like this is what I think I want for myself. And the mentors kind of offer like a shortcut. Instead of you spending like 10, 20 years, like, oh, let me like go at this on my own, like then figure out like 30, 40 years old, like, holy shit, this is not what I wanted. Like they offer you a vision to that world that you can get in like a year or two instead of like 20 years, and be like, huh. And now I'm with Noah, and there's some stuff where it's like, oh, I really like this, and this in his life. But like there's some stuff that maybe aren't for me. And like then you can find someone else of like, oh, I think it's almost like you have a hypothesis of what you want. Then you find that person that's living that life that you think you want, and then you go and you learn from them. And obviously each mentor leaves you with like different lessons, but I thought it was really interesting how you broke it down. I thought it was really interesting diving into your story. That it seems like you had like some type of quarter life crisis way earlier than most people do, right? Which is the junior year of college.
Yeah, so I'll give you some context there on, let's just say, the first quarter life crisis.
Yeah, and maybe giving some context as well. And like before hitting that junior life crisis, right? Like what did your life look like? What had you accomplished? And where were you at?
Yeah, okay, let's just take you to my junior year of college. Prior to that, because of a divorce growing up, I was able to just, I think, see very early a life for myself that I wanted, and started to figure out super intentionally of like, how do I get there? And as soon as I entered college, it felt like this bulldoze and this rush to conquer all these goals professionally. It was like, I need to build a business and get that done early and first, so that when I have a family one day, right? I'm not trying to figure all that out because I didn't want to repeat the cycle of how I grew up. And so I spent the first 3 years of college working every job and internship I could find within sports and sports business, and trying to find my own niche, trying to build t-shirt businesses on the side, or one time in college, my sophomore year, I tried to do a t-shirt business working with college fraternities and sororities and undercut the main distributors. And I tried to scale out way too quick at different campuses and all throughout the southeast. And but I was just fueled by like that freedom of like what building a successful business could do for me later in life. And then I was doing all these internships. I worked at American University this summer between my freshman and sophomore year in their sports department. Came back to college. I worked at the agency called IMG, which did all like this corporate sponsorships for athletics, which fascinated me. That led me to an internship with the Hawks and Braves between my sophomore and junior year. I'm sorry, just the Atlanta Hawks at the time. and running their sports programs as an intern and doing a lot of organization and coordinating. And that led me to, seeing an opportunity with the Hawks and Braves to create sports programs that worked with college campuses and drove ticket sales because they had no idea how to interact with college students. And that turned into a six-figure program within a year. And pre-COVID, I think it was like a $200,000 a year program that, was a fun legacy to leave. But what happened is in that first quarter life crisis, if you can tell, like, I missed out on maybe the flow of life because I was so focused in college on breaking through that maybe having fun or studying abroad or being a part of the club just for fun, because it was extracurricular, or the personal development work that I could have been doing was neglected. So it was such a focused tunnel because I was so scared that if I didn't really conquer these goals and desires that I had immediately, that I would never be able to get to them. And then if I had a family, I would be kind of stripped of my soul, and I wouldn't be able to go do that either. And I just had this massive fear that was driving me. And so when I got to my junior year of college, I kind of hit this breaking point because I was like, one, what am I trying to prove to people by succeeding? Am I fulfilled in sports and like trying to climb up this ladder of sports business? And I was trying to like prove myself to my dad. I was trying to prove my self-worth to the kids in high school or coaches who didn't see me as enough. And I had all these drivers that like weren't for myself. I mean, let's just call it a career standpoint. And so after the junior year, I remember it was a breakup that I was dating this girl where it was like I had to kind of face myself for the first time, maybe not in a full way, but it was the straw that broke the camel's back, where it wasn't the breakup in itself, but it allowed me to really peel back the roots of all these career decisions I was making. And it was very profound for me because I had to really think about what is meaning. And I know you and I share the common interest in Simon Sinek's work. And I started to ask myself why a lot. And I read Start With Why. And I really started to question, what does a meaningful life and what does a meaningful path, look like for me? And I became obsessed with finding purpose and meaning and fulfillment. I should say at an age maybe that most are still like trying to figure out what class they want to take their senior year, or what first job they want out of college, or first internship they want to do. And I was at like, oh, I've already done this stuff the last 3 years. Like, why not just figure this out a little early? And so the breaking point in the first life crisis, there was a lot of subconscious and preceding drivers in my life where I bulldozed my way through college in a sense to figure out career, succeeded, questioned what is this meaningful? And then went on this sprint to find meaning professionally so that I could have meaning in other areas of my life, which led me to a second crisis 6-7 years later. But that's how I answer that question.
I think we have a lot of things in common there as far as like the bulldozing through college, like very similar for me. It was all about the resume and also just like being in a rush, of like wanting to, for me, it was like I wanted to get it over with. I just wanted to like start working as soon as possible. I was like working on the side, like working for startups part-time and stuff. And the second thing is like, for me, it was a little later, a little after college, but like big breakup, 5-year relationship, right? Which kind of like also had me face like all of those questions of like, oh, like I was driving a lot of meaning from that relationship. When that vacuum opens up, it's like, oh shit, besides this relationship, all I have is my work, and like, what does this mean about me, and like a lot of questions. But I thought the way you faced this crisis was really interesting. You designed I think what you called like a personal internship the summer of your junior year. Can you talk a little bit about that?
What I did was I went home between the summer of my junior and senior year. And it was like the summer I didn't have an official internship because I did my freshman year and my sophomore year. And I remember getting home that summer and I just needed a break. And I remember my mom was like, "Are you going to work this summer?" I'll never forget. I just had so much anger and like built up. And I remember like I was so mad. I was just like, I couldn't get to the root of things. And I remember like taking the glass coffee pot at their old house and like I was just like pissed and I like slammed it and shattered it on the counter. And like, I'm not one who's just like anger issues. I did have some anger, I think, in college around some things from the past, but it's pretty gone. And I just like I knew like that break the shattering of the coffee pot was actually like, there was so much more, and so I remember after that, I started working with a coach named Neil Bose, who served me, for a good period, and we started digging into all those questions around career. And then what I was also doing was I was reading a lot of books, and I spent a lot of time in isolation. So what I did was I created this power washing business to satisfy my mom's needs. I remember that night after I slammed the coffee pot, I went in my room and I emailed like 5 people in the area. I was like, I'm going to do power washing this summer. And it was beautiful because not only was I getting paid to work, but I was getting paid to be still in my mind. And so by power washing, it was a very solo gig. I probably made $5,000 or $6,000 just that summer by power washing, and it was super cathartic. And it gave me time to process the therapy and the coaching sessions and the books I was reading while I was doing the work. And I'll never forget, like, there were moments when I was power washing and I was like writing down why statements and purpose statements on my phone because I could really process and think through, you know, intentionally about who I was. And while it was so raw, maybe the early versions and iterations, I was starting getting a lot of clarity.
Nice. What do you come out of that summer with as far as like takeaways and
Yeah.
realizations about yourself and where you're heading?
Yeah, so I think it's similar to what I'm actually experiencing now in just a new and evolved way. But I remember the best way I can answer this is when I went back to college my senior year. I remember feeling like I had shed all these layers. So, well, I had incredible friends in college, and they're still good friends to this day. We just don't really talk as much. I just remember feeling kind of distance, especially intellectually. It's not like I was above or superior, but the things I cared about and my interest in like the learnings about myself, it made it really hard to connect with other people in a meaningful way because what I had faced and learned and gone through, I think what most people go through in their 40s or 50s, at least the first part of that, it was really hard to really connect. And so I noticed definitely an evolution of self and a desire and need that I needed to build new relationships. And I was coming out of one shell and I needed to come into another shell. I just didn't know what that shell was. And that's very symbolic and relatable to, where I am, just the past 5 months. And so I think when you spend an enormous amount of time with yourself, with the right resources, coaches, the right readings, and less distraction from the external noise or social hangouts, it gives you a lot of time to kind of remold and like unfold who you are in a really beautiful way. It's just hard and painful work in the process.
Totally. And you mentioned you worked with a sports psychologist, right? Was he like a therapist or was he like a coach or
No.
and what kind of work were you guys doing together?
He worked with Olympic athletes and like very successful leaders in business. And it really helped me just maybe put some more function in my life. I was experiencing at that time in my life a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And it wasn't just that I was experiencing the lows, it was that I didn't know how to come up from the lows. And so once I kind of got down, I got down. And I didn't know how to bring myself up. And a lot of the work was equipping me with the tools to maybe live a little more statically in a sense, where the highs weren't as high and the lows weren't as low. But yes, it was a very influential period to learn how good athletes consistently perform, good business leaders consistently perform what they do day in and day out, and sort of applying those to my life and literally think of like my life as momentum and kind of put in infrastructures in my health and my work and my all these areas and my relationships I cared about where they could all congruently come together. So when you think of an Olympic athlete, right, to get gold 4 years out, it's a matter of maybe milliseconds, and so to train, it's like how do you consistently get better? There's a physical component, there's a technical component, there's a social component, there's a rest component, there's just all these different things that
Plus
they
the
need to,
plus the why that you were mentioning before, right? Like that driving purpose, right?
yeah. And so taking what sits on top of the purpose, taking all the different foundations in your life that you care about and then kind of breaking those down into micro steps so you can achieve peak performance. And that's how I started treating my life, for the better or worse, where it's like, how do I build as much momentum in all the areas of my life I care about so over the long term I can achieve the life I want? And again, it served me well to a degree, but it hindered and hurt me a lot to a degree as well, right? I think every strength has a weakness. So it led me, when I came back to college, to just kind of continue the story, I felt this need to connect, and I felt this need that I wasn't connecting, and I was like, I want to share kind of the learnings I went through, but it also felt so isolating. And writing has always been an outlet for me, and I was like, what if I could create a platform for other people to share these personal experiences of overcoming adversity, and I could share my story into it and see where it goes. And that led me to creating a platform called WishDish, where I had 800 plus contributors from around the country, and then the people who shared on the platform became extremely good friends, and we had the shared emotional connection over what we went through, how we went through it. That really allowed me, using a professional outlet as a way to kind of step into the next shell of who I was. You know, you talk about this idea of me finding a path, right? The idea of finding a path for myself, it takes a lot of reflection. And usually pairing that with building relationships extremely intentionally based on where you want to go in your future so you can stand out in the fullest way and belong on your own terms. And so I think throughout my whole life, it's this constant, just for the better or worse, reflection, self-discovery, and how do I progress to where I want to go and build the relationships and put myself in the right arenas to do that so that I can go achieve the things in my life that I want in all areas.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that I've personally felt with the podcast of like, hey, you have this theme you're really passionate about, right? And then it's almost like an excuse to reach out to people and connect with like-minded people that are interested in the same things, and then learning through their stories as well of like, oh, like this person's on their own journey, they've had their own lessons, right? And like learning from them, applying those in your life, and at the same time like being vulnerable with the other people, you know, and like that creates like a sense of connection as well. And I mean, anyone out there, like 100% recommend starting a podcast or a platform like Bryan started, just like that kind of like is an excuse and an accountability system almost to reach out to other people and connect with people that are kind of aligned with your values and your interests.
Totally. I couldn't agree more, especially in the vulnerability piece. And when you let people in, you know, when you both can kind of show up to a conversation and be your full self, like you just said, I think it creates that shared humanity. And then when you create a platform, right?
Yeah.
It makes it easier to elicit those voices in a very meaningful way, just like you've done. And so,
Totally,
kind of,
man. I saw it online where it was kind of, you branded it as like the altruistic BuzzFeed. So I was curious, like, what at the time was your plan with this platform? Like, do you have plans of turning this into a business? Was it just like a project that you're passionate about?
yeah, that's a good question. So when I graduated, I had an offer with the Atlanta Hawks out of college, and then this big agency out of New York, where I actually had accepted an offer to go work at this sports firm called, that was at the time, I think, a really good firm. I just remember walking away from the experience with this just bad taste in my stomach. I vividly remember like getting into a taxi cab and just like something fell off. And I don't remember what or why. I just knew in my gut it was wrong for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like hard to realize because it was like I had invested all these years already into sports.
That's
And
kind of like the like sunk cost, right? You're like, oh shit, like I'm losing all this experience I already have. I think that's what's hard with career changes, right? You're like invested
yeah,
into it.
right. And I think what's hard to realize when you're so in it is the fact that there's transferable skills and relationships and everything that you do. I think if you're intentional about how you go about things. And
Mm-hmm.
so at the time, I was getting ready to launch WishDish as a passion project. And that was going into the spring semester of my senior year of college. And I had at the time actually like probably $30,000 in the bank. All my work, all the different aspects of everything I had done, you know, the power washing, the Hawks and Braves ticket sales stuff, like I kind of looked at that. I was like, this is a massive amount of money for a 20-year-old. I was doing everything as cheap as possible to get the platform off the ground. I saw it as an investment in myself and the relationships and, you know, whatever would come. And so when I got back to school, I launched the website And I never felt so like soul driven in a way that was so aligned to who I was.
Mhm.
And that like deeper calling kept pushing me towards WishDish. And I kind of hit this right before spring break where I called my boss that I was going to work with in New York. I was trembling. I said, "Look, I'm not coming to New York. I'm going to focus on this full time." And he's like, "Well, why not, I'll help you work on it. And, you know, you can work on it part time." And I just knew in my heart it was wrong. And I was so scared. Yeah, I felt so relieved when I was done telling him. But then I was like, oh shit, what did I just do? And to like to listen to that voice and that fear,
It's
like, oh my,
hard.
yeah, yeah. And so I ended up taking Wish Dish at the time, not doing it anymore, obviously, but I just leaned into it and I was like, I'm gonna go into this. I had no business plan. I remember going home for spring break. I presented this presentation to my parents of how I was going to turn this into a business. My dad and my mom. My dad's like, "This isn't a business plan. You should go to New York and work a job." My mom was like, and they're divorced now, obviously. My mom looked at my dad and goes, I'll never forget. And she was like, "Alex, Brian always figures it out. Just let him do it or whatever." And it's like, wasn't their decision, but it's like I wanted their emotional support, right? So it was more than a passion project, right? I tried to turn it into a business. I just didn't have a business plan. I think what I always had a hard time with, and while the platform at its peak was doing like 15, 20,000 visitors a month in traffic, which was really good, I always struggled with how do I monetize emotions in these personal shared humanity stories in a way that doesn't compromise the values of myself or the platform. And by the time I think I figured out like what I could do to do it, I just realized the chapter was coming to a close, and I should probably go get some more skills and experiences to further my opportunity to build a business again, because I knew long term that's what I wanted to do. It was just going to need to take a different form. And I just said, this is a great experience to hang my hat on. I had no money though, and I was definitely not in good shape physically or mentally. So I was just like, I need to kind of have a reset.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You had those skills to make money, but then it's like this challenge that you had is like how do you mix something that's like I really feel passionate about and like that's kind of like value based and aligned with like my personality with making money, right? And so that was like the first struggle. Eventually, you made it work, so we're gonna circle back to that. But what did you do after that? Like when you had to face that, like this wasn't gonna work out.
I mean, similar to like what I shared with you when I realized sports wasn't right,
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was I did a lot of reflection. I was like, what are the skills I need to build a successful business? And the signals and the raindrops that I kept hearing and were so visible at WishDish was I never had a brand. Like it was a platform for stories, but there was no foundation. There was no message that it was a clear thread line through. And I remember everyone said you need a rebrand. And so I thought a rebrand at the time meant a new logo and color scheme and functionality on the website.
Yeah.
I did that like 3 times with WishDish, and that probably drained my money because like I need to learn branding. However, what I did know is I loved content, and I loved community, and I loved the impact that words and vulnerable communication could have on people, and that needed to be at least consistent. And so, what happened was, is I made a list of like 100 different people, opportunities, names, and I was in conversation with someone who was a mentor at the time, and like still is today. His name's Adam Wexler. He runs a really successful sports betting company called Prize Picks, and so we were in the Atlanta Tech Village, and that's like Atlanta's main tech hub. And he said to me, "Have you heard of Kairos?" And this was like in a period I was really struggling and trying to figure out my next step. And he's like, "You should really get to know them. They're fun. They're about to relaunch. I know one of the partners." It stuck with me, and so I went home and I started to research it, and it was this community of some of the brightest young entrepreneurs around the world. And I literally went on LinkedIn. I requested like 100 of the fellows. A couple of days later, this was like in my sprint of outreach with different opportunities that felt aligned. I got an email from the CEO. He's like, "What do you want? Your name's come to my inbox like 4 times, but the timing might be good because we're looking at opening up a Southeast division." It's like, okay. So, and by the way, Kairos had a brand. Like they had a clear message about like creating solutions where public and private markets have failed, and then like investing in entrepreneurs, innovating in those spaces.
Yeah.
And it was really inspiring at the time, and had incredible, like the way people got in, the people they were affiliated with. It was really special. And I said, why don't I run the Southeast Division, build it out for you? I took all the modeling from the Hawks and Braves and growth strategies from WishDish, and I kind of created this plan for the Southeast, and I just sent it to them. And at this time, I had nothing to lose. Like, take it and run with it, or like, let me run it. And so I volunteered to run it, and then I started putting in all the fellows, and then I became a fellow, and then became an executive, and then towards the end of the year, like I
Was this all
remember,
for free in the beginning, or?
I
Yeah,
did it all for free, because I was trying to figure out. I was like, whatever it takes to like break through.
yeah.
And I sent him this plan. I started doing really well, and by the end of November, he's like, two things. One, do you want to come to Finland to the Slush conference with us? And it was like with the best investors and entrepreneurs and all these like private plane, like unbelievable like experience things. Like, two, you want to like, I need help. Like, can you run the community? Because I really need to focus on the investment side. So I was like thrusted into this leadership position and put in front of all these people who like, I think they thought like, oh wow, like who is this kid? Like he's running the community and this, and like, I mean, at the time, like looking back, like I was like, I should not be here,
Yeah.
you know?
Just to caveat, like I think that's one of the values of like that's one of like the unfair advantages of like working for free, right? Like the thing is like you get your foot in the door, you become like almost like indispensable, right? And then it's like people offer you more, right? Even if you don't have the skills, people trust that you can figure it out, because you've done it before and you've showed them. I mean, that's how I got the job with Tom. No social media experience whatsoever. But like I got in the door for free for 90 days, and then there was an opportunity that opened up. I had proven that I can figure things out, and so they trusted me to give me a shot. Once you're doing the work and it's like they need you, you're there for the long run. Even if you're
Yeah.
like younger than you're supposed to be or like less experienced.
Yeah, I just want to add to what you said too. Is like you could see the long term in mind. Like, what country did you come from again?
From France.
France. So like you came from France and just plopped up in SF, and we're like, I'm gonna figure it out. Like, it takes balls to do that, right? And kind of you're back against the wall out of the gate. So it's like,
Yeah.
why not? Like, you have nothing to lose. Someone's gonna open the door for you. You might not know who, but I think what's neat is the people who respect that kind of hustle. You're gonna attract those kinds of people of taking those kind of outsized risks, and usually will work out for you. But you got to kind of have the balls to overcome the fear to do it, and the strength and resilience to kind of push past like the no's. And so everything to what you just said, absolutely.
I actually was somewhat involved with Kairos, or I wasn't involved, but I had some experiences with them where this was, I think, 2014, so before you joined. They had this World Summit in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that strike a bell? So I was there. I was very inspired, and I was very into tech at the time. And you mentioned like their brand was strong. It was, man. It kind of fired me up, right? Because they have this whole message about like social entrepreneurship and changing the world, and like they have all these fellows that are, I mean, really just like 20-year-olds who are building these companies that, at least on paper, seem like they're changing the world. And so yeah, it's definitely an amazing brand.
No, it's definitely evolved, right, and pivoted over the years. But yeah, at the time, I think in its true heyday, like it was done well and done right, and it's just branched off and it's different now. But it's really neat you're able to see that because it was a lesson into branding, and it was a lesson into taking my skill sets and applying them in a way that could be strengthened and used and harnessed, and then also I could learn and get an education around it and build relationships that still serve me to this day in a really profound way. So special opportunity.
There's a certain glamour around it as well, right? Like you mentioned, like planes and stuff. I know, like they would do their summits like at New York Stock Exchange, and there's an allure of success associated with it, right? Whether that was like artificial or not, I think they did a really good job of like attracting fellows to this like, ecosystem and community.
No doubt. Yeah, there was definitely an allure and a glamour, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned when you work in an environment like that. But it's what you take out of it and apply to your own life. And I think I took all the experience, and it really shaped me in I think a very positive way.
Nice. You stay there for about a year, a little longer. Did you learn what you wanted about branding? Like what was your experience coming out of this, and what were the learnings and expertise you built there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I saw the power of a message. I saw the power of how a message could rally a community, and I saw how, with the right content, kind of was like the trifecta: the brand, the content, the community. It was just one of those things where like the chapter just should close, and I kind of felt that it was either like become a partner, but that really wasn't my track, and they made that clear. And nor looking back, what was going to be right, or like continue on building what I had built, but the growth curve was kind of over.
For sure.
And so I ended up moving from Atlanta up to back home to DC to kind of rebuild my life. I do think I learned what I wanted, but I kind of went back to that same process of, am I ready to build a business again? I didn't feel so in my heart. What are the skills I need to do it? And what's next? And what became very clear to me was I felt I needed to build a personal brand. Something I learned through Kairos, and I just started thinking about really deeply, was I wanted something that could carry with me through the test of time, no matter who I worked for. And then I was like, I need to work for a CEO, like write directly for a CEO and understand their daily life. And I was like, I also need to understand content distribution. And just magically, I was able to find an opportunity to work with Allen Gannett, in DC. I met a bunch of people when I got to DC. A lot of people were like, you should meet Allen.
Was
So I
that
reached
through
out.
your network from Kairos, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Like Kairos still pays itself to this day forward. And so the DC chapter, when I was meeting with them, like, go meet Allen. And so I reached out. I was like, hey, I've been told I need to meet you. She's like, let's do lunch. And I had lunch with him, I'll never forget, at a Pete's Coffee in DC. And I showed up to the wrong location first. I was panicking when I walked in. He like blazes off all these questions. He went so quick.
That was his background, and what
He
was
was
he
a
an
tech
entrepreneur?
entrepreneur. He had sold one company, he had like an investment fund that he also like rolled off of. He was 28. He was writing a book. I mean, the level of success he had, and just his sharpness, and just the way he processed information, unbelievable. And to do what he had done, I was like blown away. And I remember walking out of that meeting, and I was like, oh shit, I'm never gonna talk to him again. Like, I completely embarrassed myself. I just felt like I was just put through a ringer of like, it didn't even feel like an interview. It just felt like a daze that I just like blew through.
Very similar to the interview I had with Tom. Just like ta 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 ta, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to know more. And so after that interview, I followed up. I sent him this book marketing plan. He told me he was writing a book, and I was going to do one for WishDish. And I said, hey, if helpful, here's this plan. Best of luck to you. I never thought I'd see him again. Like, truthfully,
Yeah.
I was at the Forbes conference, and like my last stint with Kairos, kind of helping with the conference, and I'm up in Boston. And I get an email from him, and it's like, what are you doing after Kairos? I was like, I don't know. Like, I have a couple things I'm thinking about. He's like, you want to come work for me for a year and a half, just for me, help me build the brand, launch the book, and I'll send you off from there. And it's like everything I had outlined and reflected upon what I wanted to after Kairos like showed up in an email. It was an immediate yes, because I knew that's what I wanted, and it's just like I never asked them for the job.
It's
It's
funny
just
how that works, right? Like things just show up like that, and a lot of times I feel like we kind of agonize around like career decisions, right? But like whenever the right next step appears, it's like your entire body is like, yes, like this is right, you know? It's like it just feels right on every level.
no doubt. And it takes a level of awareness, though, and I think reflection. So when the right things are in front of you, they're there. And I think personally, professionally, all areas of our life, right? It's all integrated. And we don't take the time to, I think, reflect and figure out who we are and what we want. We have the most beautiful and perfect thing right in front of us, but we might not be equipped to recognize it or, handle it. And kind of gotta let that person go or thing go, right? And I think that happens a lot because we're not really aware and involved enough to recognize that this is something really good. And I think if I could have taken that for granted and been like, yeah, like this could be good, but like I was like, no, was perfect, and I didn't really care about the money. It was all about. I mean, I got paid, but like it was about the long term.
Where does this idea come that you had to work for an executive? Because I mean, it's obviously a similar path that I followed, similar path that a lot of people on the podcast followed, but I'm just curious where that inspiration came from. Like, what was your thinking behind it?
I just felt I needed more of an edge, and I needed to kind of see how the sausage was made.
Yeah.
And not only was I able to work with an executive, I was able to do it in an aligned way where I could bring in everything I had built into the Allen's ecosystem and really amplify what he was doing.
Yeah. You get to witness someone build a company from the ground up, right? And like it's almost being like their shadow, right? You get to see everything they're doing and like you take it in almost subconsciously as well, of like, oh, you learn all these things subconsciously, like a child learns like from watching their parents, right? It's like you're like shadowing, you're like, oh, all this is coming in, and then it's like at some point you feel ready. I mean, it seems like you felt ready at some point to start your own company after all these experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a great way to put it.
What were you doing exactly for him?
I was doing all of his PR, running a lot of his content and community stuff online and on all the social, helping tee up the newsletter, the website, the speaking engagements, submitting for applications. It was like building him. It was like building him a brand platform, and he had already done some of the legwork, no doubt. Like Alan, he had the content, he had a lot of the things in place in a way, but maybe like half baked, and like he really enabled me to kind of show my ability and take me under his wing and set up those systems and processes and like what it was just special. I mean, helped get him a TED talk and like on like 40 different podcasts, helped him put in the strategy and the operations and like also just got to see how he worked as well. Like, and he was demanding in the best way. He put me into shape. I messed up a lot. He literally made me put a double check sticky note at the top of my computer because I had made a lot of little mistakes and it drove him nuts. As it should, right? It's someone who has worked to build a brand so hard the last 10 plus years. I was managing his reputation in an authentic way, but I sometimes messed up on an email or a message I sent. And so it was just a lot, it was never stopped. And it was good.
You've mentioned a lot of like a couple mentors to me that have been like really influential throughout your life. I also have a quote here that I pulled from one of your blog posts. I think it's from earlier in college, but I'll read it quickly. It was also in this period where I used my strength to break through the doors I should have never been able to open. I gained free consulting and mentorship because everyone wants to help the broke startup founder who cares and will help in return.
What article was that?
I don't recall. I can look it up after, but
It sounds like something I would write.
I guess what I want to get to is how have you seeked out mentors? Just general advice of like the value of mentors and someone that's seeking a mentor, like how do you find a mentor?
Yeah, it's funny. I've never like officially asked people to mentor me. I
Yeah.
think it's always been very natural, um, and also extremely intentional. It's like in this idea of how we built the brand on this idea of pathfinding. When I think about where I want to go, and I do a lot of the reflection and discovery around it, I think about who are the people who have been there and done that, and then I go seek them out. I'll give you a recent example. I hit, let's just say, Crisis 2.0 in May. Well, probably like March. It was the beginning of it. And in June, like mid July, actually, when I was in Denver, I've been working a lot with this guy named Rich Keller, who has been pretty influential in helping me on the brand side of things. But it's funny when the brand is so tied to a person. It's tied to a person. Rich was really insightful, and I opened up to Rich one night, and I said I really need like male emotional support. And I said I've always sought it out, and when I see older men who have families, who are present with their kids, who this and that, like I latch on because, by the way, my dad is an incredible father, so this isn't a like discount to him, but I think there was something where the male entrepreneur who with ideas, so like my ex-girlfriend's father, his name's Peter. He was like the first man like I saw as like God, he had an incredible family, beautiful children, great wife, like, and like I was so enamored with him because of who he was, and then he took such an interest in me, and then he was like emotionally available. And so when the relationship ended in June, like I didn't just like lose someone I thought was incredibly special, but I lost
Like a father figure.
And it was devastating. And like it ended amicably, beautifully and amicably, and it's led to incredible growth. But I think it became really apparent, Rich was really helping me through probably one of the hardest periods of my life, because it wasn't just the relationship I had lost. I was facing my childhood and my past in a way I never had, which was far greater in retrospect. Not that the relationship wasn't meaningful and beautiful and taught me a lot, but I had so much pain that I had never processed, and I realized through that I needed a male emotional figure to guide me and do all this emotional work that I never done. And I said to Rich, like, I need help with this. I didn't expect Rich to take it on, but what it turned into was, for every night after work, for probably an hour or two, he spent just cutting into my past. It has been the most painful experience, but the most growth inducing ever. I mean, he came to Denver to visit me for a week. I remember I cried in the guy's arms. It's like I felt like this root system being lifted, like the more I like let the pain out in tears. And my point is, I've always known what I've wanted, and I've tried to put the right people in my life who have the things I want to learn from. And part of, I think, a mentorship type of relationship is, you make sure, I've always made it a point, and people who have helped me and gone out of their way to help me for free, that I'm going to be just as valuable back, if not more valuable, and pay it forward to them
Yeah.
and other people. And so, I, just even with Rich, and even a mentor named Steven, who helped me at a critical time in my career, both of them have now said to me that I've paid it back to them and then some, probably more so, because like I really care for the people who help me get over these very tough times. And so I think mentors show up in people's lives, like the teacher shows up when the student's ready.
100%.
And I've sought out the right teachers when I've been ready and I've needed them, and the right people have just showed up, and I've been very fortunate. But I've also haven't been scared to tell people I need help.
Yeah, well, that's important too. Yeah, it's you touched on like so many points. I think the you mentioned like the term like father figure. I think there's something about I always resonate with this analogy of like for hunter gatherer tribes, like children used to be raised by like several men, and women, in the tribe where it's like you got to learn a little bit from everyone, I think you can learn some stuff from your father, but a lot of the times there's different dimensions that like one person can't just embody, right? There's like different lessons you can learn from everyone. And I've seen like finding mentors as a way to kind of explore different paths and lifestyles as well. Like I started out with Tom Bilyeu, who is like very A type, hyper performer, just like work, work, work all the time, and but also super successful, built $1 billion company, right? And it's like at the time that's the similar to you. It's like at that super ambition, I was like, that's what I want, and so I gravitated towards him. And through learning from him, through being around him, through working from him, observing everything he did, slowly I realized that that's not actually what I wanted. You know, that is the biggest lesson for me. That was an invaluable lesson that he taught me of like, oh, this is not actually the lifestyle that I want. And so then hopped onto another mentor, which is like, oh, like because I still very drawn to entrepreneurship, but like let me try to find an entrepreneurship that has figured out not that the other path isn't great. I think everyone has a different path, but like let's figure out a way to balance like a very healthy group of friends, social life, like hobbies, but also like running a super successful business at the same time. Maybe not at the scale of the $1 billion company, but like still a very successful company, right? And so that's why I hopped on to another mentor, which is like who I'm working with right now, Noah Kagan. But I just think that there's something about you have a vision of like, oh, like this is what I think I want for myself. And the mentors kind of offer like a shortcut instead of you spending like 10, 20 years like, oh, let me like go at this on my own, like then figure out like 30, 40 years old, like, holy shit, this is not what I wanted. Like they offer you a vision to that world that you can get in like a year or two instead of like 20 years, and be like, huh. And now I'm with Noah, and there's some stuff where it's like, oh, I really like this, and this in his life. But like there's some stuff that maybe aren't for me. And like then you can find someone else of like, Oh, I think it's almost like you have a hypothesis of what you want, Then you find that person that's living that life that you think you want, and then you go and you learn from them. And obviously, each mentor leaves you with like different lessons. But I thought it was really interesting how you broke it down.
Yeah, I love what you said about shortcuts. I think that's absolutely true, and I think we as men, like, there's this just theory we need to go do it all ourselves, but I think that's wrong. And I'm lucky my mom instilled in me growing up, like, it's okay to ask for help, and not being shy of not being shy to take help. I think is really important because people want to show up and serve and help, right? It's just how you manage the relationship and like serve back.
How do you start those relationships though? Because like I'm assuming you don't start like a relationship like that by I need help, right? Like
Right.
I feel like a lot of time it probably starts with like let me help you, right? And then once you've added value in some way, you can kind of open up and be like, hey, like I'd love your
Sure.
input on this or
Yeah, I try and take when I meet people, I really try and take stock of the things that they care about and that they're good at and enjoy, and kind of where their strengths are, and also maybe where their weaknesses are. So one, it's easy to kind of understand how to help people, but then two, if you do need help, it's understand how to find the right person at the right time. And so having that like mental bank of like who is good at what, I think has really served me because it allows me to get on the right path faster, overcome the right rocks, and faster than most. I'm not saying it's easier. I'm just saying that I think when we lead our lives with the right people around us, it's just a much more meaningful and richer experience.
yeah, totally. Okay, so watching outfits, hop for a appointment yesterday. So we're doing part two, dig into company and people he's worked with as well.
Jeremy had me so exhausted after yesterday's appointment with the doctor.
So yesterday we spoke about you didn't feel ready to start a company time, and that's why you go work with entrepreneur and kind of like work as the right hand man and shadow what they were doing to learn to be an entrepreneur and kind of like the skills. Walk me through that experience and how you came out of that. Like obviously your next job was the company that you're still running today. So how did that experience help and change as far as you finally feeling ready to start a company?
Yeah. So I was working on a book launch at the time with an author named Allen Gannett. Working with Allen, I really got a kind of a backstage, no pun intended, kind of view at what it was like to run a brand for an individual and how to put together all the pieces. And it really made me start thinking about just the PR industry in aggregate in the publishing industry. And I started to realize all these gaps, you know, these busy individuals, they didn't have time to work with 5 or 6 vendors at a time. There were a lot of pieces that needed to be moved and coordinated all at once. Brands are marathons, so you always have to kind of be moving with the times. And I just, how do you, these people, they bring their ideas to the table and they want to have messages and they want to have impact, but they don't always necessarily want to put in the time day in and day out with the consistency required to actually go do the work, to really have a presence, to build a community really intentionally, to have a message, to create a podcast, to write the book, to do all the things that are really fun and kind of sexy, but like actually doing them isn't always fun and sexy, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, what if we could take all these kind of individualized boutique services, bundle them together, democratize it, and then create these systems of scale and efficiency? Because with Alan, it was a true opportunity to bring together all my skill sets and relationships and things I had learned, combine that and merge it with him to create something really special. And while he drove, I think a lot of the success had to do with him, I think I was able to bring a lot to the table as well. Um, and he was my master teacher, and he really whipped me into shape as a leader and just someone who operated, day in and day out. And to watch that, it was inspiring. He went to work 9 to 5, 9 to 6 with this company, and he came home and he worked for 2 or 3 hours. And so to be under someone who was just such a force in such a beautiful way. Like, and he cared so deeply about me and other people. Like, and then his message, and to get something out there that he truly cared about. I mean, that was a really cool environment for me to thrive within. And so I just saw that moment, maybe 6 months in, there's opportunity here because I didn't see anyone else doing it to bring it all together. And so after we launched the book, we sold, did hundreds of PR placements and TED Talks and, tens of thousands of book sales and talks and B2B sales and content and national book tour and, all the content posts and, all the pieces, right? After we did that, I was like, I got a website together and I launched my own personal website, and it was just bryanwish.com. And I figured I'm going to build a brand off myself and like create the product line and do it A to Z. And so I racked up, like, I remember, I'll never forget, about $15K in credit card debt. And
Were you working free all this time?
no, he was paying me, but after he paid my apartment expense, which was pretty pricey in DC, and
Yeah.
all the food and just bills, and he took care of me because I knew like it was a long-term thing. It wasn't about the pay today, but I think he paid me full time, like I could survive and exist. And so yeah, he did right by me, no question. But I didn't have much in savings because took all that from WishDish, as we talked about earlier. So I had to invest in a website, a team. Like, I had to get all the pieces off the ground. But it was through that experience where I was able to, it was like let's just call it my R&D expense. Because I was really able to understand, if I could build a brand for myself and put all those pieces together, how could I go do it for somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so this whole time, in a way, for the business, it's like I've been the product that I've had to test and experiment on, and once I figure it out for myself, then I roll it out to others.
Yeah, so it seems like in that position, you really identified a problem, right? Which is like influencers have that much time, and there's so many different they have to make it in order to really build like a brand. Like, why don't I bundle all of that and offer as a service skills, because I've been doing it for the last year. So that what led you to feel ready, because like you finally had a problem and you had the
Yeah.
skills
So
to that need.
yeah, I mean, I still was taking a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was debating an offer that was more full time, but it's just in my gut again. It didn't feel right, but I did feel like I was ready to take something on again. And I had some momentum from the network I'd built through Allen, and then the track record and the kind of wins I had from the last couple of years, where I felt, if I play my cards right, I can probably piece this all together. And so that's what I just kind of bet on myself, and I felt as ready as I could be. When you kind of like grow into a new shell, and you're like kind of like, it's like a whole new world. Like, I felt that, and I felt right. But I was terrified, but I knew I was I was making decisions that were aligned to who I was because I felt it internally. So yeah.
Process of starting the business. So you were starting it as you were still working for Allen, it seems like, on the side.
It was so I never told him I was working on it. We had
Mm-hmm.
like a 14-month contract or something, and the agreement was like he was going to probably help me like launch off of him whatever I wanted to do. He knew coming in I wanted to start something, so this was a new transition. This was more of a transitionary role. Once I started getting the kind of edge, I knew that if I was lazy with Alan, well, I know two things. If I didn't bust my ass with Alan and succeed, I have no opportunity for the future. I want to have him to refer me. I want to have him to launch me into the world. I want to have that relationship. Just because he paid me doesn't mean it would have gone beyond that. And so to me, I had to succeed with him. I had that foresight to be like, if I don't do this well, I'm doomed because I won't have something to launch off of. And then two, I mean, the work with him was really intense, a lot of coordinating, but I had to get ready for rolling off of him because I knew that when the contract was over, that we probably weren't going to continue working together. You know, I needed to figure out how I could go off on my own. And so I was building the website, I remember, at night and on the weekends, and I was trying to get a team, and I was trying to get it perfect because I needed something, I needed to stand it up. I didn't just want to throw something together, but I really wanted to do it the right way. And so that's when I started to like figure out how do I build a brand, like, taking what I learned from Allen, but I was like, how do I build a design foundation? How do I build a message? How do I like structurally put a brand together in its MVP format? Um, and so I started out as bryanwish.com because I thought if I launching off of Allen, the easiest thing to do would be launching off of my name because I felt I could sell that the best versus a company at the time. And then I figured if I was going to sell myself and sell as personal brands, if I was working to build a brand, I could sell something that I kind of knew how to do.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You get your first client like beyond Allen?
What happened was is when we were done working together, I said, "Would you launch my website?" He looked at it. He said, "Bryan, this is flawless." Like getting validation like that from him, I mean, he was by far the bar was very high. It was very hard to meet his demands, not because he wasn't satisfied with the work, but he always had a way to like sharpen me because I was still pretty. I mean, I was fairly green, maybe. I think he saw the ability and the talent and the something in me, but he really needed to sharpen me. So I worked really hard to make sure the website was flawless. When I showed it to him, I said, "This is will you help launch me?" And at the time, Allen had a pretty massive, and he still does, a pretty massive LinkedIn following. But like this was like LinkedIn 3 years ago, and his posts were getting like 400 likes a pop,
Mm-hmm.
most times, because he had the distribution that most people didn't have. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I've learned enough about these social algorithms. So what I did was I had him launch the site, and then I went through my phone directory, and I probably sent the post to like 100 people. And so I had at the end of the post, there were probably 500 or 600 people who liked it. Okay, the post had 100,000 views after like a week. So I reached out to every single person off that post
Who liked it,
and
you mean?
liked it,
Yeah.
and I said, "Hey, thanks for liking the post Alan shared about me. Hope it was impactful or something." And that led to like 30 meetings, and then that led to like my first 4 clients. And then 3 months later, basically I set them up on a retainer, and then 3 months later I was out of debt, and I went on a hunt to go find a COO because I didn't want to do basically what I was doing for Alan was the work that gave me an understanding of everything, but the work I was not my strength in a way. And so I was like, I one, get out of debt, and then two, figure out how do I scale myself because I need to put in the systems to create the momentum for the business to scale, which is why I think we have been able to accelerate how we have the last 3 years.
Dude, I love that. I love stories are my favorite. Like just like one post, they just like blow up, and the fact that you followed up with everyone that liked the post, and those people eventually, I'm guessing like some of them maybe were interested as a client, and some of them like referred you to other people they knew, right? And it's just like it goes to show you. I think if you put out something on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, and you get like 10 likes, like those are 10 real people, and like on
Yeah,
these platforms, like connection, like one-to-one connection is more valuable than just like the reach of like, oh, it's like 100,000 people. But it's like, I think the more important thing is like the actual like connection of like, oh, like message someone and it's like you have a real relationship there versus just like internet, you know?
yeah. No, it's great. And I think to your point, it's one when people engage on stuff, it's an opportunity to build meaningful relationship. Like online's important, but it's how what you do with it offline that's even more important. And I
Mm.
don't think the disconnect is it's not all about just getting tons of people to like. I would rather have 10 of the right people like a post than 100 of the wrong people. One is vanity and perception, and the other is real meaningful engagement,
Yeah,
right? And
100%.
so I've always, we're not a growth agency, is what I like to tell people. We build thought and impact leadership for individuals to impact the right people, but I don't necessarily care about growing something significantly the wrong way. I'd rather grow it slowly the right way and give something a long term foundation. And there's not a whole lot of long term thinkers, but when you think about building a brand, especially a brand from scratch, I've been doing it myself for the last 3.5, 4 years, right? Been on this brand journey and kind of taking the hard punches first so others don't have to kind of fall as hard. But I mean, I'm still nowhere close to like where I want it to be, but I definitely know where I want it to go. And I would rather work and cultivate someone early who's had a lot of success in another space and help them build a brand versus someone who's already massively successful. Now, don't get me wrong, like those people are fun to work with, but I would rather be a part of growing something really meaningful from the start
From the
and
ground
do
up,
it.
yeah. Can you mention this term to me the other day? You said we specialize in second act professionals. Can you clarify that what that means?
Yeah, so a lot of these people are like investors or successful authors or have been very successful CEOs, or we're starting to branch into other spaces like entertainment and music, and get behind people who have had a track record of success in one industry and are kind of in this like act two of transition. Like, okay, I excelled here, and now what do I do? And the idea is, right, if we can help an individual kind of house all their talents, skills, relationships under one roof and help them cultivate a message around who they are and then create the product extensions around them, right? It's more ownership of their brand and who they are. This
Yeah,
feeds it into the, where blockchain and crypto is going and tokenization long term, which is exciting, and monetization of attention and audience. But short term, right, it enables somebody to take everything they're good at and then own it and put it under their own name, which to me, I just think there's more meaning in that and more like just thoughtfulness when you do it like that, opposed to let me just start another company in the act two and have another exit. But it's these people who have already kind of been there and done that, and they're like, okay, what's the impact look like in the second half of my career?
yeah. And I think, I mean, the applies to everyone. Right? Was like he built a company, and then it gets a point where you have like a certain level of success in your career, right? And then you want to give back through teaching, right? And that's, I think, the value that building a brand can offer, like teaching at scale, kind of. It's interesting what you're saying earlier about building a brand and finding your path kind of being the same thing, right? And that kind of being at the core of you guys' mission, like path finding and creating a brand. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and the path is kind of all the things I shared earlier in the show of never really fitting in and always kind of trying to struggling to find my way or different things. Like whenever something has happened in my life, I've always tried to find the best way forward in the most aligned way, and I've never really compromised on my values or what feels right. And I think find a path. It's like how do you find a meaningful and aligned path, a meaningful, aligned, and impactful path, and that's definitely very top of mind. Has always been. And I think growing up, I questioned early. I said, how do I have something I can make great money at and have impact with? And so heading into college, it wasn't just about finding the job to get freedom through entrepreneurship. It was also about like how do I find a way to make money and have impact at the same time. So I never took a job that didn't align with my values or something that felt like it was getting me a step closer towards that goal. And so to be able to finally, like 4 years in, 4 years later from where I started, or, really 10 years, since I kind of really started asking myself this question, 10 years in, I'm finally at a point where like I can wake up every day and say, like, making money, not significant amount. We're reinvesting a ton in the business and team, but we're making money and I'm doing something meaningful. And that feels really good.
Yeah,
Hopefully that scales.
nice. How did you end up working with Nir Eyal?
I met the Morning Brew founders through Allen, so I knew their head of growth. His name was Tyler Dink at the time. He runs a company now called Beehive or
Okay.
Try Beehive. Tyler's great. Be a good person for you to know. And I pitched Tyler on getting Allen and Morning Brew for the book, and he put me in touch with Alex. And then I met Alex in Austin and New York during the book launch when I went up to New York. And I built good rapport with them. So what happened was I had launched the business and I got a text from Austin like 3 months in. He's like, hey, I'm about to go have dinner with a big author. I can't tell you who, but I think he could be a client or something, or what should be a client. He's like, could you take another client on? This is at a time where I was like very much at the beginning. And so I remember Austin put me in touch with Nir. I was still figuring out like a pitch and all these things at the time. And I was just like, I told Nir, I was like, yeah, I was like, here's kind of how I work and what I learned with Allen. And, I take a more of a tailored approach to clients. And, I don't really have a set, like, here's a package A or B. It's pretty tailored. And I remember him saying, like, he's like, I really like the custom approach. It's like, yeah. He's like, well, let's give it a try. I remember I was still like writing content for clients at the time. And so I'm not a writer by trade. Like, I'm not a writer. Like, I can write, and I write well from the heart, but I'm not like a writer.
Okay.
And I delivered the first batch of content to Nir. He was like, hey, I don't think he used these exact words, but he was like, this is awful. Like, this is not my voice, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I mean, because he's like a doctor of his voice. Like, he is so, he knows precisely, like,
Yeah.
exactly how he wants to come across. So I was like, oh shit, we're going to lose him. Anyways, long story short, we didn't. I mean, he's Nir's still a client today. He's been, it's funny, he's the author of Hooked. He's probably shaped our product more than any client.
Yeah.
At least in the early days. He always had such direct, constructive feedback.
For your company, you mean?
For me.
Interesting.
Although we crushed his book launch for him. I mean, crushed.
So where did it go from, like, your writing sucks to...
So my writing sucks. So I forget what happened, but I found a writer who could work with them. He worked with us, though. He's like, yeah, like, I think he saw, like, maybe similar to Allen, something in me, and he always liked me. And he's like, okay, I believe in this kid. If he can get the job done, I don't know. But, like, I was, like, trying to prove to him. And so, anyways, finally after, like, a couple months, we had his voice, like, pretty down pat. And that was great. And, he's been a client ever since. We've had profound success with him. We've done it all organically.
Hooked with him, or was that after?
No, we launched Indistractable. But when we started working with him, he had zero social, And I'm not saying we're his growth agency, but we have deployed his thought leadership, I think, better than he ever thought possible.
So you guys run all of his socials?
Yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, the newsletter on LinkedIn, a ton of PR stuff we've been able to send him. He's been a great ally. He's talked to clients who want to become clients. He's, I think, referred a couple. He's been so adaptable with us. He's just been such a great person to know.
And what the process of working with him look like? Like, how do you guys work together? Do you guys have like a meeting every week, or repurpose a lot of the stuff like directly from his book,
Yeah, it's a mix, right? I mean, I think that's one way to do it, and like just getting insights or taking articles, but there's a lot of repurposing, and then a lot of like actively building the community, right, for him, and through different tactics and methods, and just doing that organically. And it's very like hands-on because his inbox might get flooded with 50 messages a day, or more, so there's so many systems and parts that need to be accounted for, and things can't fall through the cracks. We get to kind of hold the hand of like, things that can really drive significant opportunities for these individuals. So the service has to be so white glove and tactical, and through 4 years of repetition, it's kind of what we've had to build out.
What does a book launch with someone like Nir look like? Like, how do you guys organize that?
I mean, a book launch just in general has so many moving parts. I mean, there's how do you activate an online community, which I'm sure you've learned a lot through Noah and Tom, right? Mm-hmm. How do you take the people online and get them to go do things in their networks to spread the word, right? How do you line up hundreds of PR opportunities for an individual all to come out within a month? How do you drive speaking opportunities, TED Talks? How do you create business B2B opportunities through communication tactics, to send a book, to send a galley, personalized letters, to following up, to do you have the digital assets? Are you going to build a private community? Are you going to do private events with individuals in your network that are going to inspire the audience? Are you going to have like sample chapters if people pre-order? Are you going, there's so many moving pieces to a book launch. And if you do it right, you can kind of catch that wave of massive momentum.
Mm-hmm.
But you really have to line up. Everything has to like go off at once. It's like launching a rocket. It's extremely technical.
Big I read The Perennial Seller by Ryan Holiday a
Yeah.
while back, and that was the most I didn't realize before, but that was the most like the biggest takeaway for me is like you're like a year planning for a book launch where like you're planning every single event that's going to happen like during that 1 week of the launch, right? But everything is like being prepared like 1 year in advance. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, at least a
Mm,
year, right? And like these platforms take years to build. So I think if someone's like, I want to write a book, but if they don't have a platform, like don't even think about writing the book. I mean, I'm not saying don't pursue a dream, but like again, and that's why it's such an overwhelming and intimidating process. Like, and I think that's why what we do as a business is such a need because a lot of people want to do this work, have no idea where to start, and then to piece it all together, it's a massive puzzle.
yeah, no, for sure. You basically finally started a company, which is a company that doing something meaningful and that you're passionate about, which is kind of like your goal from day one, right? It's yeah, kind of this drive towards this goal. And recently, you've kind of gone on a second journey of coaching and pathfinding, described in some of your blog posts. So I'm curious about that and how, like, what events triggered that. Um,
Yeah, it's funny. I've told more on this podcast. I have not shared any of this publicly, but they say your story is your credibility. They say,
yeah.
um, look, I was dating this girl who, it was a great relationship, and it was one of the most exciting relationship I had been in. And I talked a bit about it earlier, but I loved her family, and it was just like the most special connection I think her and I both ever held. You know, for reasons that we don't need to share, the relationship really needed to come to an end, which was her to I let her decide, and it was a beautiful ending, and we parted ways. It was hard because I think, as you talked about in my mind, right, I was kind of on the road. I had the meaningful business I thought I always wanted, and then I could go build that family I never had. And she was probably the first person that I could have ever seen maybe a potential future with. And life happens, and it's hard. But I think what happened after that is I was facing the loss of her and her family, but then I felt this massive and major like, oh shit, I gotta like face myself. I gotta step into who I am, and I can't use other people, relationships, and work as this kind of armor, right? From like stepping into who I am as a full person. And I think relationships and my work has always been a way to shield myself from really understanding who I am beyond work or beyond just my functional way of navigating in the world. And it's always given me like a safe way to like go in and out because I could these external variables in a way that weren't myself could kind of guide and shape me. And so the relationship was a kind of a, let's just call it a trigger moment of, and like while sad and while it came with so much learning and whatever, what really hit me after was I need to look within and really face myself. I should not numb it and run to another relationship, not numb it and run it to drugs, alcohol, just an escape destination wise. But like, I knew that it would probably be good for me, regardless of what happened, to get away for the summer at least and really take some time for myself. And I ended up going to Denver though, because just I thought it might be better and more
City. Yeah.
sensible. I called it this journey to self. And I went and I bought a camera the day before I left DC. And I was like, you know what? It'd probably be good for me to document some of this. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I remember I went to the camera store. I didn't even plan it. They had all the starter equipment. I was so lucky. Normally they don't. I had a great deal on a camera, and I left. I befriended the camera store guy because I was so overwhelmed with even how to turn on the camera. And I got to Denver. And so it's funny, I'll tell you a story. The first night out, it was 14 hours into my drive. I was going to pull over at a motel, and I couldn't find a motel in Iowa. So what I did was, I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna finish the drive in a day. I was like, I'll get there, the next morning and get to call Denver in a day and go sleep somewhere and then go find an Airbnb until my next Airbnb is ready. So I get back on the road off the exit and I go down and I'm like 20 minutes on the road. It's like 11 at night. I wanted to escape I just wanted to get to Denver. I was like, I just need to get there. Like, I was just like this massive pull and like just this heaviness of what I was leaving behind, and get back on the road and I hit a tire in the middle of the highway, derailed me in my tracks, like smashed my front bumper. And so I had to pull over on the side of the road. I was on the side of the road for like 10 hours until the next morning, until a cop like banged on my window and it's like, how can I help? Because AAA wouldn't come and I didn't know how to get a tow truck and it was miserable.
Like on the hero's journey, like the obstacles, getting in the way.
Well, the fact that it was the first day I think was a
It's
sign in
uncanny,
itself.
yeah.
And the sign was telling me, hey, Bryan, you need to slow down. Like, you need to slow down not just your car, you need to slow down your life. And it kind of like was this surreal moment where I just had to like let go of like, the frustration I could have felt. And I was like, all right, part of the journey. And that's what I did. And so when I got to Denver, the next 2 months were the most intense period ever. It still is. It's just a different part of the journey right now. I stripped every layer to my core, unlike I've done ever in my life. And I worked with this guy, Rich, who I told you about. And it was that pain that I really, like, I remember there was like one day I really had these breakthrough insights, and I just like a couple days in a row I just like broke down on the weekend because there was like so much pain inside and I just had to like let it out. Denver, for the July and August, it was this like 2 month period of just like putting a major puzzle together that I didn't even understand the pieces to. And if I didn't understand the pieces to, how would I even put it together? But it took someone to guide me. And we spent probably 2 hours a night, 3 or 4 nights a week. And that was after a hard day at work and after going to the gym and like keeping my workouts consistent and then like coming home and then working my like emotion. That's what happened. So it's been this personal kind of finding my path and trying to learn how to show up wholeheartedly and connect my head and my heart. And I'm a different person. Like the old ways of me working, like I can never show up in the same way. And it's growth, but it's painful growth. So I'll pause. That was a lot.
That's good. That's good. To make it practical, like for anyone that feels on going on a similar journey, what are a couple or action items that you would give them as homework?
Yeah, I think it starts with like everyone has that like voice within that like speaks to them. I think we can shut it out or we can be open to it, and like we got to lean into the fear of it. And there's a quote, it's like the tunnel you fear to enter holds the light and reward. I forget it's by Joseph Campbell. But like, so my point is, I think tip one is like listen to the voice, like, and lean into it and follow it. And like you'll know when you're following it and you'll know when you're avoiding it. Like there's pain on both sides. There's pain in the numbing and there's the pain in the going into it. Like you choose what you want to do.
Yeah.
So that's one. I would say the second thing is find somebody who has gone through a lot of what you've gone through, whether that's a therapist, a support figure, someone who can truly invest time into. And honestly, I think if it's a therapist, it needs to be more than just like once a week or once every like 2 weeks. Like this, it's intense personal work. So I would probably advise to find someone who can kind of take you under their wing and then learn alongside you, bring their life experiences to the table and help you go through. Don't think there's a lot of people who could do the work that Rich was able to do with me. I was very lucky. I think it was pretty kismet. But find someone that you can have like free talk space with to like get everything out and make sense of things. I consistently journaled and then like I wrote articles every weekend. I think I'll put it into a book one day to like piece together these passages and these writings, right? And so I would just say be really intentional about like understanding thoughts and like connecting the dots and the insights as you're working with someone. People are thinking about going on a journey like this. Usually it's prompted by something. So one, I think they also need to figure out what's prompting them to do it, whatever that trigger is. So they need to get to the bottom of that. And I think it's also like connecting the past, not beyond the trigger, but like I went deep into childhood stuff, high school stuff, college stuff, post college. Like every piece I like opened up. And so I think having the willingness to like face yourself and like know it's going to be painful, but like just keep leaning. So be ready to like start connecting the dots of the past. And I would say education, like a classroom, bring in supporting materials. I mean, I was reading books on spirituality. I read a book called Letting Go, The Untethered Soul. I read A Surrender Experiment. Read The Power of Now. Those are spiritual books. I'm still reading another.
I laugh because like I read all of those like last summer. It was like I had that similar moment. It was like I feel like those are kind of like a starter pack for for unbundling yourself, yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. And I started reading a bunch of Brene Brown books, and
Hmm.
then I'm reading a book on finished a book on masculinity called Man Enough, and now I'm reading a book about like power and like holding yourself with like understanding power dynamics and like how to show up better in the world and how to value yourself. And so all the things I started to uncover in my insights, I started to find materials to support the journey around. So I wasn't the only voice in my head. Rich wasn't the only voice in my head. My writings weren't. I could have supporting evidence.
Hmm.
And then the last thing I'd say is like build a support group. I had 3, 4, 5 friends that if I needed to call a friend to like just talk, I knew they were going to be there. That was my path, right? And I think those a framework that someone takes a, I would call it a bold, courageous, brave journey like this and really like does the work, like you can't do it alone, and it's going to take people and resources around you to help you through it. Probably get to the other side much better than where you started, but it's not going to be easy.
Nice, man. Thanks for sharing those tips. Do you have? I feel like out of all of this reflection you've done on yourself, you've also come out with a lot of insights about your company mission and you guys' values and the change you want to make in the world. So I wanted to kind of talk about the intersection of that. And it seems like you've done a lot of around BW missions, mission values, and so something on that can be valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think this journey's brought in we built the brand on helping find a path and helping individuals find paths, right? And so because we've created, I think, such a dynamic foundation as a brand. By the way, we're rebranding, so it'll be called something else in the
Oh,
spring. But as I'm finding my path as a business person, and I'm finding my path as a person, an emotional, full, dynamic person, we're going to build product lines around all the things I'm doing. So I see myself as the test dummy product, as I said earlier. So we'll put a book out. We're ready. We're built. We have a ghostwriting division right now. We're going to figure out the publishing side. So we'll build that. Use it to go speak. We'll build out this whole speaking side. We'll keep innovating on like where I can like as I build the path professionally and where we're helping other thought leaders do the same, right? And also like I might put a movie behind short documentary behind this, but why can't we have a film division? And like I'll probably put a long monologue out, or I have no idea, but that could be cool. So I'm like, okay, well, why not build services and basically I can set the tone, but then on the personal side, like how do I take a journey like this? I think a lot of people could benefit. They might not need to travel throughout the West. Like I decided to do it because I had the freedom with the business to do it, but I think you could do this work at home.
yeah.
So how can you create your own journey to self at home, and how can we productize that? I've really helped a lot of young professionals find their path and like figure out how to do things that are aligned to them. And I built a 4-month education program during the pandemic, and I've taken about 10 students through it, and that's a path finding. So I see this brand, right, encapsulating all these learned and lived experiences of who I am. And eventually, like right now, we're super focused on the business leader and like ideally we're going to differentiate and scale different industries and put in tech. But then how do I bring this around and do it for young professionals on the personal side and emotional side and also the career development side,
Mm.
right? It all comes back to helping people find a path, which is an extension of who I am as a brand. And so to me, this is a 15, 20, 30-year business.
Love it, man. I love it. Where can people find you online?
People can find me on LinkedIn, just Bryan Wish, that's with the Y. And then people can find me on email, that's Bryan, Bryan at first name Bryan last name wish.com. So Bryan at bryanwish.com. And then Instagram and Twitter, Bryan Wish _.
Nice. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for sharing the journey. It's I think there's a lot of lessons around people wanting to find their own path. And I was reading yesterday. Wait, I don't know if I read it, but it's like, oh, by Ram Dass, of like everyone's just walking themselves home.
Oh, I think I put that in a newsletter.
Dug deep, man. But that quote like felt like a great illustration of journey that we're all on. So
Dude, well, thank you, man. Thanks for being a part of it. Seriously, it's so special.
hell yeah. There you have it. I hope you got something out of this interview. I'm really trying to make this as valuable as possible to you. So if you have any feedback on how I can make this better, or if you have any questions for me personally, I'll get back to you. Reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is @JeremyJohnMary. You can also comment if you're watching on YouTube. You can just comment below. All right. Thanks for listening and have an epic week.